Somewhere between 45 and 55, something in you quietly stopped performing. And it wasn't the big things like the marriage, the job, or the kids getting older. It was the small thing, the constant low hum of managing what everyone else thought of you. I'm Emma, and there's research now that tracks exactly what happens to a woman's sense of self in that 10-year window. And it matches what so many of you describe when you talk about turning 55. It isn't you giving up, it's your priorities changing, your people-pleasing fading, and your own sense of self-worth rising in ways that are actually measurable. At 45, most of you were still mid-juggle, with kids who still needed rides or money or both, and a parent who was starting to need you in a different way than before. The phone calls got a little longer and a little more worried every year. A job wanted your full attention, and a marriage or a friendship wanted it too, all pulling from the same tired well at the same time. You handled it because that's what you do. Handling it became so automatic that you probably couldn't tell me the last time you asked yourself what you actually wanted out of any given Tuesday. 10 years later, the schedule hasn't necessarily gotten lighter. There's still a job, still people who need you, still a house that doesn't run itself. What changed is something underneath all of that, and it's not that life got easier. Something in you stopped running the old program, the one that needed everyone's approval before you could feel steady in your own skin. That's the part nobody warns you about at 45, because at 45, you're too deep inside the juggle to notice the program is even running. There are 3 specific shifts behind that change, and this isn't just a feeling you've had. Researchers have actually measured all 3. What you chase changed, who you perform for changed, and what you're still willing to explain yourself for changed, down to almost nothing. None of these 3 showed up on the same day, and none of them announced themselves. They stacked one on top of the other, so slowly you couldn't feel it happening. One ordinary morning, you noticed you were a different woman than the one who used to apologize for ordering the last slice. The first one is the shift most of you will recognize the second I name it, because you've probably lived it in the last year without ever putting a word to it. People-pleasing was never a personality trait, even though it gets talked about like one. It was a strategy, and it usually got built early, often in childhood. It became a way to keep love and approval coming in a house, a classroom, or a friend group where that approval felt conditional. Psychologists tie this pattern to attachment, the anxious kind, where a person keeps seeking reassurance because some part of them still expects it to get pulled away. Women in particular got handed a specific job on top of that. Keep track of everyone's mood, smooth things over before anyone notices they need smoothing, and be the one who clocks when someone's upset before they've said a single word about it. That's not a character flaw. That's a role you were trained into so early, you likely don't remember the training happening at all. There's a piece of this that's worth saying plainly, because it gets misunderstood constantly. Researchers who study personality do find that women, on average, score a little higher than men on traits like agreeableness, the tendency to prioritize harmony and other people's needs. But no research has ever found a biological switch that makes women naturally built for people-pleasing. What actually happened is closer to a lifetime of practice. Girls got praised early for being easy, cooperative, low maintenance, and that praise taught a lesson that stuck for decades. Being needed and being loved started to feel like the exact same thing. And untangling those two took most of you until well into your 40s to even attempt. For decades, that role cost you something real. Monitoring other people's emotional temperature all day is exhausting work, even when nobody, including you, counts it as work. You learn to say, "I don't care, whatever's easiest," so often that you started believing it about your own life, not just about which restaurant to pick on a Friday night. That constant managing left behind a quiet, ongoing labor that never really clocked out at the office or at home. It didn't even clock out inside your own head at 11 at night, when everyone else was finally asleep. More than 90 of the people watching this video right now are not subscribed. If any part of this has felt like someone finally saying the quiet part out loud, that recognition is worth passing on to someone else living through the exact same thing. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, share this with one person who needs to hear this. Now let's continue. By midlife, that constant labor hits a ceiling. What once kept you safe or liked or needed stops being worth what it takes out of you. Your system starts refusing to keep paying that price, whether you consciously decide to stop or not. Mental health research is consistent on this point. The ability to say no and actually hold a boundary is linked to real improvements in how people feel day to day, not just a nice idea about self-respect that sounds good on a poster. Setting a boundary at 55 isn't you turning cold or difficult. It's an exhausted system finally shutting off a program that stopped paying for itself years ago, sometimes decades ago. That shift alone would explain why so many women describe feeling different in their 50s. But it's not the only thing moving underneath the surface. While the people-pleasing was fading, something else was rising in its place, on a completely separate track, and there's an actual number attached to it. Notice what that means about the order things happened in. The boundaries didn't show up because you suddenly felt confident enough to set them. It ran the other way. You got tired first, and the tiredness is what forced the boundary. Only after you'd been living with that boundary for a while did the confidence catch up and make it feel like it was yours all along. Self-esteem doesn't collapse in your 50s the way the culture likes to imply. Researchers Ulrich Orth and Richard Robbins tracked more than 3,600 adults across 16 years, checking in on them 4 separate times between 1986 and 2002. What they found runs against almost everything you've probably been told about this age. Self-worth is lowest in young adulthood, then it climbs steadily through your 30s and 40s, and it peaks somewhere between 50 and 60. It doesn't decline at 50. It peaks at 50. By the time you hit 55, you're close to the most confident version of yourself you will ever be, statistically speaking, across your entire life. Picture what that actually means for a second. The version of you that spent her 20s second-guessing every room she walked into, replaying conversations, rehearsing apologies for things that didn't need one, is gone. That's not the version of you standing in that room now. Researchers tie this rise to something fairly simple. By this stage, your work, your relationships, and your sense of who you are have more stability behind them than they did at 25, or even at 45. You're not proving yourself from zero anymore, the way you were the first time you walked into a new job or a room full of strangers. You already know what you can survive, because at this point, you've survived most of it already, and lived to tell the story afterward. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Culture tells a woman past 50 that she should be fading, less visible, less relevant, stepping back to make room for someone younger. The research says the opposite is happening inside her, whether the world reflects that back to her or not. Your confidence isn't shrinking on the inside just because the outside world stopped paying as much attention. It's near its lifetime high, even on the days it doesn't feel that way, even on the days a stranger looks straight through you in a store. Think about how strange that gap actually is when you say it out loud. The world gets quieter around a woman in her 50s at almost the exact moment her own internal sense of worth is sitting near its peak for her entire life. Nobody hands you a headline about that. There's no card in the mail. You just notice one day that you stopped needing the room to notice you back. You mistake that for indifference, when it's actually closer to arrival. That rising confidence changes something else too, and it shows up in who you actually want around you, which is the part that gets misread the most from the outside looking in. A lot of women notice their social circle getting smaller in their 50s and worry it means something is wrong. They think it means they're isolating or losing their spark or turning into one of those women who just stopped trying with people. Stanford psychologist Laura Carstensen has a different explanation for it, called socio-emotional selectivity theory. As people sense they have more life behind them than ahead of them, they get deliberately selective about where their time and energy go. That's not them shutting down. It's them finally being able to afford to be picky about it. Research backs this up directly. A smaller, more curated circle of people is linked to better emotional experience day to day. Not worse, not lonelier, better. The friend you used to keep around out of pure obligation, the one who drifted off your calendar over the last few years without a dramatic falling out. That wasn't you going cold. That was your attention finally going where it was actually wanted, instead of where habit and guilt used to send it. One honest note on timing here. This shift isn't tied to a specific birthday on a calendar. It's tied to a sense of how much time you feel you have left. That's why some women feel this shift as early as their late 40s, and others don't feel it until well into their 50s or later. A health scare, a loss, a divorce, any of those can pull that sense of limited time closer, years before the number on a birthday cake would suggest it should. Either way, a smaller circle at this stage in your life isn't a symptom of something going wrong. It's a decision your own nervous system already made for you in the background while you were busy living the rest of your life. You can probably map this onto your own calendar right now if you actually sit with it. Think about who got an automatic yes from you 5 years ago that would get a polite decline today. Notice that the decline doesn't come with guilt attached anymore, or at least not nearly as much. That missing guilt is the whole shift, showing up in one small, ordinary decision at a time. All three of these shifts, the boundaries you stopped apologizing for, the confidence that rose underneath you, and the smaller circle you built on purpose, all feed into one last change. It might be the deepest one of the four. It's about how you talk to yourself about your own life story, the version you replay in your head when you can't sleep. A study out of the University of Buffalo, led by researcher Holland Reicher and published in the Journal of Personality, followed the same group of adults for 8 years. It tracked how they told their own life stories over that stretch of time. The researchers looked for two specific things in how people narrated their lives' closure, meaning how well someone had made peace with old regrets, instead of still carrying them around. The second was self-actualization, meaning how closely someone's actual life matched the life they always meant to build for themselves. Across late midlife, people told their stories with measurably less regret and more satisfaction with who they'd become over that same 8-year window researchers were watching them. Now, layer that finding on top of everything else you've just learned about yourself. That's not you lowering your standards or giving up on old dreams in the background where nobody's looking. That's you, right now, actually telling the story of your own life differently than you told it at 45. There are fewer loose ends hanging off the edges of it now. The researchers even found a third pattern running alongside the other two, a growing sense of connection to something bigger than your own daily to-do list. That connection can show up as faith, purpose, or just a quieter kind of perspective on what actually matters by the end of a life. You stop performing for other people. Your own sense of worth rises underneath you without asking permission. Your circle narrows down to the people who actually deserve a seat in it. And somewhere inside all of that, you finally stop cross-examining every choice you ever made. That's not decline, no matter what the culture keeps implying about women your age. That's the whole point of getting here. If you made it this far, you're one of the ones who actually needed this today, and that's not nothing. This isn't about getting softer with age. It's about finally putting the weight down after carrying it for decades. If this describes something true about where you're standing right now, tell me in the comments what changed for you first. The boundaries, the confidence, or the smaller circle. And if you want to understand this decade of your life even more clearly, the next video picks up exactly where this one leaves off.